Hey guys, welcome back to more neighbor stories. In this video, an HOA president tried to annex my inherited property by claiming that he owns my house. Let's dive right into the video. The title story starts like this. So when I was growing up, the neighborhood I lived in was a pretty nice place. I would even go as far as to say that it is the average suburban area at the time. I played hockey in the street with the other kids until our parents would have to open the doors and call us in for dinner one at a time. And this was only in the 1990s, so this is not some crazy long time ago type of scenario. Like a lot of other kids, when I got older and went to college, I always felt like my house would be there for me if I ever needed to come back home. It was only ever my mom and me, which even in the 90s was seen as a little abnormal. Not to me so much as a kid, but I learned later in life that my mom got a lot of pressure and backlash from other people. Especially the moms that helped a lot at school and got annoyed that my mom was busy working all of the time. Another thing about my neighborhood was that it did not have an HOA and still ran perfectly fine. In fact, it was only 5 years ago that some of the neighborhood ladies decided an HOA was a smart idea and to start one up. My mom did not want to join the HOA, and since I was in my 20s at the time, she did not feel the need to hide anything from me when I would talk to her. She told me right off that the people running it were the same type of women that gave her a hard time when she was bringing me up. In fact, a few were exactly those same women. The HOA was not mandatory though, and since my house was established already, they could not do a damn thing to force her to join. They could only try to pressure her, and they did. They never left her alone about joining the HOA, like it was some kind of cult, and they couldn't let one person not want to be a part of it. My mom was smart and explained to me why she did not like HOAs, and it all made a lot of sense to me. I did not expect my mom to die a year ago. She was not even sick or anything until she got extremely sick, and well, you get it. I was devastated, as anybody who lost someone close to them knows all too well. I don't want to focus too much on that because I don't want to start crying again, and because that is not really the point of the story I want to tell. I inherited the family home, and since I was only in a pretty crappy apartment, I wanted to move in there. I felt it would be good for my healing to be there too, but the HOA wanted to make things a little bit more than just difficult for me. So my house had the misfortune of being right next door to the lady that was in charge of the HOA. She was one of the biggest pushers trying to get my mom to join and convinced almost everybody else to be a part of the HOA. My house was a sore thumb sticking out as not being a member, but I did not care. She started leaving me notes on my door on behalf of the HOA, trying to tell me that the house I inherited was not mine. In fact, she was claiming it as HOA property. I was furious at this, and she clearly had zero sympathy or care for what I was going through. I just wanted to tell her off. Me, where do you get off thinking that you can just stick these notes to my door? This is my house and you're not gonna try and push me out of it. Neighbor, listen, this house is surrounded by HOA members. Since your mom passed away, we are claiming automatic incorporation of the house into the HOA. Now, we are not saying that you cannot live here, but there are certain things you need to and abide in order to keep the property from being seized by us. Me, I don't have to do a damn thing here. You are just trying to make crap up and think that I will roll over and obey because of some threats. Neighbor, listen, I don't want to fight with you. All you need to do is a few simple things. The first being to sign this paperwork just establishing that you're part of the HOA. Then we need the 5 years of back pay to catch you all up. Me, I can read that form. I'm not signing it because that means I would be joining, which I have no intention of doing. This is a voluntary HOA and you just want to pretend that I don't know what scam you're trying to run here. Me knowing what she was up to didn't seem to stop or even dissuade her from her actions. Instead, she was now sending me not only random violations that had my house being against HOA policy, but also did something kinda scary. She sent pictures of both my house but also with me being in them. Walking from the car to my door, going into my house, etc., it was beyond creepy, and she was crossing that line into full-on stalking. I contacted a lawyer because I did not really know what else to do, and he was gonna send her a letter to stop, but he discovered something else. She had filed paperwork trying to claim authority over my property. It was still in the stage of being processed, but my lawyer quickly put in some kind of appeal to stop it from going through before we even could get in front of a judge with it. You might be curious about what my neighbor's motive was with all of this, and I know it because she was telling it to everybody else. She wanted to standardize the neighborhood and get everybody on the same page of things. She also promised that if every house was part of an HOA, then the property value for every single house would be 3 times the amount it is now. And by the way, ripe stars, maybe Karen got something wrong here. Obviously, the value could be 3 times lower maybe. If that is your goal, that's a good idea. Anyway, she had lied, telling people that I was just refusing to cooperate with the HOA and was basically squatting in my own home. She wanted to come off as the hero, and she was going to court to get me evicted, and not because she was trying to steal my property. Well, before we even could get to court, she decided to make another bold move and tried to put a lien on my house, as the basis of me owing too much money to the HOA that I was refusing to pay for. My lawyer also made sure that would be put on hold until we could get things sorted out in court. Well, my neighbor did not stop there and even tried to enter my house a couple of times, claiming that she had the right to do this as the head of the HOA and just needed to inspect it. I refused to let her, which led to even more fighting and just more ammo I could then use against her personally. The same went for the fact that whenever I had anybody over, she would seem to come out of nowhere, asking them a bunch of questions about me and saying that they couldn't go into the house because it didn't belong to me. Court was a little bit of a mess, but that just might be me not being the most comfortable person in a courtroom. I don't know much about law, so I felt totally out of place when all I wanted to do was save my childhood home from being stolen by Karen. I didn't have issues paying for things like mortgage or taxes or things I actually needed to. It was just not gonna happen with me paying HOA fees and crap they were making up that I supposedly owed them. My lawyer did manage to sort out a lot of the problems in just that one visit to court. The first being that I was not squatting and in fact owned the house despite what the neighbor was saying about me. The second being that any paperwork she had claiming I was in the HOA was clearly faked and she couldn't ask for all those years of back pay to begin with. The judge was on my side with all of this and agreed that I did not owe the HOA anything since I was not in it. Their paperwork to get the lien on my house was being denied. In addition to all of that, the HOA was gonna need to pay my lawyer fees as well as pain and suffering for making me deal with all of this crap when I just wanted to be grieving. At least now there was court proof that my house was independent from the HOA, so I would not run into the same problem again, hopefully. That was not the end of things though, because I also wanted to press criminal charges against my neighbor for the things she had done to me. It might not sound like it on paper, but it was a huge deal, and the things she did were not only horrible, but actual real crimes. She had stalked me while taking those photos and seeing when I had anybody coming over. She had lied to other members of the community and defamed my character as some kind of evil person. Plus, she had attempted to break into my house or force her way into it, which is trespassing with an attempted breaking and entering charge. Unlike the other court case, this was not against the HOA at all, but instead against my neighbor herself personally. And I made sure a copy of all of this was being sent to the rest of the HOA board, so they actually knew exactly what their leader was up to. Apparently, I was not the only home she was trying to go inside and inspect. People just did not know that it was far past her rights as an HOA president to do these kinds of things. The HOA did not want to deal with her and had an emergency meeting in order to get rid of her on the grounds that she was not working in the best interest of the community. She of course blamed me for all of this, but I did not care. I was waiting for a verdict on her crimes and I heard exactly what I wanted. She pled guilty and was given 6 months in jail plus a year of probation for her actions. Revenge is sweet, but I'm just glad I can be left alone now and the neighborhood to not see me as a horrible person like she wanted. And yeah guys, if you still enjoy the HOA stories, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments to show your support. The next one is a very interesting story from r/legal advice that you don't want to miss. It is titled, 2 years ago I bought 5 Australian classic cars cheap for sale from the widow of a deceased backyard collector. Here's the catch though, the widow has died and now the grandson has threatened to sue me as he wanted the cars. So I'm close friends with a coworker and we have helped his mom in her 80s with house maintenance. His mother's neighbor, I will call her Elaine, was in her 90s in 2016 when Elaine's husband, who was in a home, died. While doing maintenance on my coworker's mother's house, I drove there in my 1975 Falcon and Elaine came out to ask me to have a look at some cars I might like that had belonged to her husband. I won't go into detail, except 3 were in good drivable condition and worth a decent figure. And 2 more were ruined but good car parts. At the time I couldn't afford anywhere near what they were genuinely worth. 2 are at least in the top 5 desirable Australian classics. I told her what they could fetch on the open market, but she was happy to take $5,000 for all 5 cars, well under their value. And yeah guys, that seems insanely cheap for 5 classic cars, but then again, OP did not really mention yet what the cars actually are. Let's just say, if it's a 1969 Pontiac GTO, I would freak out. Anyway, she wanted to make sure that they went to someone who would appreciate them, and I paid for and collected them a week later, and I still have the 3 good ones, 2 now on historic registration and the other one in storage. Elaine passed away in the middle of this year, and her grandson is on a warpath over the cars. He has found my contact details and phoned me several times threatening to sue me for effectively stealing the cars from his grandma, and has turned up at my front door once demanding the return of the cars. I've not been served or received anything in writing from him in a legal sense, only his business card, which sounds dodgy to begin with. I've verified that he is an actual lawyer, as he claims through a website of his employer which lists him with a photo as specializing in commercial and insurance law, just like his business card. I would have expected if there was a real legal issue with the ownership of the cars, it would be in relation to the grandmother's estate proceedings, and I would be contacted by mail by someone acting as executor, and not via phone calls and doorstop visits by one angry smug son acting like it's happening between me and him alone. Since I'm not a lawyer and my presumptions could be completely out here, I'm posting here. If need be, I could now afford the market price of all the cars anyway. Is the grandson likely to have a case, and should I find a lawyer of my own? Relevant comments, not a lawyer, but if Elaine's husband left them to her in his will, she was free to do with them as she pleased. Ergo, the grandson has no claim. He'd be banking on your uncertainty of that to strong-arm you into cutting a deal. Don't ignore any official summons or claims, but you can safely tell him to sod off over the phone. If you want to get really petty, you could contact his law firm and complain about him, but as long as he was not intimating that his employer was in any way involved, it's none of their business, so they could tell you, cool, so what? OP then responded, thanks, banking on my uncertainty is a good way to describe the vibe I'm getting from him. He's not exactly throwing his law firm's name around, but it's on the business card he gave me. Then OP was saying something in regards to what the cars are, and he said, I feel more comfortable describing them now after reading the responses here. So one registered is an XY GT replica in nice shape built from a Fairmont, the other registered is an XB Fairmont Coupe in excellent original condition, and the third, I'm still working on getting back on the road, is an XA sedan Falcon 506. The last 2 were wrecks and have already been parted out and the good bits kept, a spare XA sedan and an XW that looks like it had spent 30 years as yard art. The XW collapsed at the torque boxes and plenum while being trailered and nearly came off into pieces, but worth it for the glass and trim alone. Update, I spoke with my coworker about the issue and he talked with his mom, who clued me into her neighbor, Elaine from my previous posts, not having any grandsons. My coworker's mother is still in contact with Elaine's son and daughter, as they own and still work on Elaine's old house next door. She put them in contact with me. They wanted to know who it was who was actually threatening what about the cars, as Elaine has no grandsons, and then we spoke. They identified the lawyer grandson as an old ex of her. He was once a partner of, but not married to, one of Elaine's granddaughters for a few years. He's also known to be in a lot of debt, which might explain desperate hunting for valuable items. Elaine's son and daughter reiterated that their dad had left instructions to Elaine for the cars to go to someone who would cherish them, and that they were happy they did. And glad to hear from me, by the way, that they are still being looked after together. I haven't contacted the faux grandson's law firm yet. I got a lot of evidence of his misrepresentations to me, and after googling NSW law, I'm not 100% sure of the legality of all of it, especially about sharing my home security and dashcam recordings directly to the other firm, or even speaking directly to them. I will go through my own legal representation there as a filter on what I need to give them to make sure they know of his behavior linked to their firm. Small update, fake grandson came around twice more. I now got multiple records of him visiting my residence, threats via text and many phone calls to me after I asked him to not contact me again except in writing. Complaints have been made through my lawyer to his firm and relevant regulatory bodies. I informed him of the complaints on Thursday and reiterated not to contact me again, and I have not heard a peep from him since. Last update, fake grandson had already been dismissed from the firm before my lawyer and I complained, and he already has complaints against him for other reasons. Either way, the next one is an Am I the A-hole story. So I, 47 female, have always had a very strained relationship with my brother, 51 male. He has had a very bad accident when he was 17 and spent 3 months in a coma. Ever since he has been the child, my parents swooned over and they make excuses for everything he does. I've been to therapy because of this for over a decade, as I resented him for my parents forgetting about me when I was younger, even though I love my parents to death. My nephew, 31 male, has basically been raised by my parents as well. His mom passed away during childbirth and my brother lived with our parents till about 4 years ago when he moved in with his girlfriend. Because my brother is handicapped and doesn't have big motor skills, a lot of the childcare was taken care of by my parents over the years. Until my nephew moved out of state 5 years ago for his job. A couple of weeks ago, my parents were meeting with their lawyer to set up their will, as they are both no longer in the best of health and want to make sure that we are taken care of. The only big thing they have is their house and car. They were talking about that they want to split the inheritance 3 ways, and I got confused and asked them why 3 ways considering it's only me and my brother. They said they wanted my nephew in there as well, as they basically raised him since childbirth and consider him largely as their kid too. I told them that's not fair, as I have 2 kids as well, and if my nephew is in the will, they should as well. My brother said that what they were doing with their money is their business and I should stay out of it, but I disagreed. Eventually, my parents agreed and did not give my nephew his share. My brother called it a giant dick move and called me petty to punish my nephew for the resentment I have towards him. We broke out into a fight that my parents had to unfortunately break up. My nephew called me a couple of days ago to check in on my youngest, as he is her godfather. He had already heard what happened and just said that it was a bit of a Karen move to do, but he's unbothered by it as it is none of his business, but my brother is still very upset with me and my parents are rather cold to me as well. Am I the a-hole here? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know what you think about this. OP is the a-hole here or not? Let me know in the comments. Comment number 1 from Reddit, not the a-hole. OP's parents brought OP into the conversation about distribution, and OP gave the opinion that a will that included the nephew should also include OP's children. Comment number 2, your parents are cold to you for being factual. They have 3 grandkids, so if they want to give to their grandkid, they should also give it to the other 2. Fair is fair. Do they even know or address the fact that they caused you being in therapy because of them? Like, sure, your brother needed more support, but they ignored you. In the end, it's their money, but they should be fair. In my country, it doesn't even matter what is written in the will, you get a percentage of the inheritance. Update number 2, I just want to clarify some things. My nephew is godfather of my youngest, she is 7, my eldest is 10. He is also the only one in the family around his age. All my cousins are around my age, and then there are the small kids. He and I have a good relationship, he has always been a very hard worker and studied hard to be where he is now. And I cannot be more proud of him for what he's been able to accomplish with the limited resources that he has. My parents absolutely adore my kids as well and babysit often when me and my husband need help or are busy with work. My parents are in a care home and want none of us to take care of them. They made sure that no one had to, and even when my nephew was living with them, he did errands for them like running to shops, groceries, making appointments for them when need be. Just because he moved out of state, he cannot do that anymore. We also did it together, as many mentioned that my brother wasn't able to do this. It's true that they see my nephew more as a son than a grandson. Edit number 2, to answer a few more questions I've received. Me and my husband have been together for nearly 20 years. He has his own construction business and I am a head teacher. I also think the reason why my parents want to take him in the will is because of all the medical expenses my brother had with the accident and the continuous aftercare. He's had virtually nothing left of his share of the inheritance. I think that's what my parents tried to avoid by putting my nephew in the will, though I'm not fully sure. Edit number 3, people ask me about my nephew's mother's side of the family, but she came out of foster care. My parents looked into getting into contact with anyone, but it appeared she was on her own too before meeting my brother. So there's nothing there either. My nephew has worked every weekend and holiday ever since he was 14 to pay for his tuition and largely his expenses like clothes and the like, and my parents didn't support him financially as much as they would have liked. My nephew and his soon-to-be husband have good paying jobs like me and my husband too, so it's not like he needs the assets either. I talked to him about this after the post blew up the way it did, and he said that if it bothers me this much, he would rather have his share put in a college fund for my daughter, his godchild. I told him that this is not what this is about, and he just said he cannot win on this and won't discuss this any further and just not inform him of anything anymore, and he's going for the come what may mindset. He also said the same thing to my parents. Before we end the video, I will read one last story from r/petty revenge that is brand new. It is titled The Reason Why My Ex Is My Ex. So many years ago, after the birth of my oldest son, I desperately needed a job. I was scouring through the job section of as many newspapers as I could get my hands on. The pickings were slim as my highest qualification was graduating high school. I had to ignore minimum wage jobs because it could cost more than it paid. Then my ex said some magic words: "Stop being so picky, you're never gonna earn more than minimum wage." I saw red, and then I found the ad. They advertised free training to become a software engineer, professional certification, and then you get a job afterwards. The only requirement was a high school diploma with a passing math grade. At first I was very wary because it definitely felt like it was too good to be true and possibly even a scam. But I had nothing to lose by just checking it out, so off I went. The first day of the acceptance process was grueling, multiple timed aptitude tests that took hours. The ones who passed were invited for a second round of tests, and this time there were a lot less people out of the 30 from the first day. Only 2 of us were accepted at the end, and it was not a scam. The reason why it was free was because the employers would pay for the training. I was thrilled, and then followed the most intense 4 months of my life. I was determined to prove my ex wrong. 8 hours in class every weekday, another 6 for homework and studying, and doing a weekend project for another 20 hours over the weekend. I only got about 6 hours of sleep each night. Thankfully, my son was sleeping through the night by then. And well, I made it. Did really well in my final exams too. The job search was short and sweet, and since it was only 3 years before Y2K and even entry-level engineers were earning good salaries. Well, when I got my offer, my salary was more than my ex got. Internally, I was elated and thought, "Take that, you insufferable prick." I didn't say it out loud though. As time went by, I kept getting really good raises and promotions, and my ex finally had enough of the humiliation and wanted a divorce. I jumped at the chance to escape, and that is how my ex became my ex. And yeah, ripe stars, thank you for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.